Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the weekend warm-up. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by my Action Network co-host Duck. As always, here on Friday, we're coming to you live, making our final additions to the card. This obviously is a special weekend, championship weekend, so we got 9 title bouts to discuss. And since we're live, we're going to take questions from the audience along the way. You can submit your questions right here on the YouTube chat or over on the Action Network Discord, or hit us up over at X. We want to get to as much of your feedback as we can, hitting on all the different angles of this game. I know that with only 9 games left, there's an opportunity for you to get some action, whether it's props, first quarter bets, any of those exotics. We want to make sure that we cover it all and give our insight into it. Now, before we get into our bets, a reminder, there's a quick and easy way to tail the bets that Duck and I bring to the table here. First, sign up for Action Pro. You'll get instant notifications whenever an Action Network expert tracks a bet, whether that's me, Duck, Stucky, Colin Wilson. You're going to get the best bets at the best numbers. Plus, you can also access our pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and his predictive analytics team, and a ton of other benefits. Right now, go over to actionnetwork.com/pro. You can get $20 off the annual price with the promo code BBOC20. So don't miss out on the best bets at the best prices. Visit actionnetwork.com/pro. Use the promo code BBOC20 to get $20 off a year of Action Pro. All right, Duck, before we get into any of the Q&A, a couple things. One, I just need to get this off my chest. In terms of the entire season, Buffalo screwed me the hardest basically the whole way. And lo and behold, the FBI van was outside of the facility waiting to snag Victor Snow. I mean, the sports books clearly aren't going to give me a refund. I hope some of the listeners who've rightfully given me shit for having too much faith in Pete Lembo, they had, a mole inside their organization who was, running out of bounds when he could have scored touchdowns. There was big numbers that they didn't cover. That early season performance against Kent State where they only won 31-28. Maybe that changes how I feel about Taquan Roberson. Maybe some people are running, the wrong routes. How much can a number one wide receiver, as someone who played college football, played the wide receiver position as you did, how much can that throw off an offense if strategically they drop passes at the right time or fall out of bounds or, don't have those quick reads and they're on the same page with the quarterback?
It was certainly stunning. It was a bad look. It was a shocking video and really inexplicable to run out of bounds in that situation when you were looking at the just the development of the play and the route and the catch, and he was pulling away from the defender. And somebody had reached out to me on Twitter and said, well, maybe the color of the sideline confused him. And it's really, there's nothing to be confused about at home there in that situation. The end zone's a different color. You kind of know where you're. That's where you play most of your games. I was really stunned about that, and tongue in cheek, I kind of had replied back, anytime touchdown, no, um, has maybe the spirit behind that, but it's huge when you have a number one receiver that is not on the same page. I mean, there's 4 or 5 players that are running pass routes on any one play, and if you're running the wrong route, you're screwing up another guy or two, and the whole thing is just not able to operate. So yeah, it can be really, really problematic, specifically at this level when most of the routes are timing routes, and so the quarterback is reading the defense. And then he's making a throw even before the receivers are out of their break. And then the receiver turns and the ball's right on him. I mean, there's just so much that goes on to the passing game and coordinating the passing game and trying to get the timing down. It takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. And a lot of these players are there now with playing the position and doing 7-on-7 and doing the throwing sessions in the morning in the summer. I mean, there's so much time and effort that goes into it. And it would be really disappointing for the other 95 guys on that team if there was one guy that was just not doing the right thing. Really, really disappointing. And to be honest with you, might be deserving of an undocumented ass whooping if that would be the case.
As always, we're going to get into the weather in addition to our Steam report, where the money percentage, the bet percentages are headed. The weather's a lot easier for me in this afternoon's episode because 4 of the 5 games on Saturday are in domes, so perfect conditions there. But when we look at it, let's start with the Jacksonville State Kennesaw game. It's going to be maybe some scattered storms, light rain, shouldn't be too impactful. But what has been impactful, and you'll get into it here in the Steam report, Duck, is that we're almost looking at 5 points worth of movement. Kennesaw flipping, from opening at +2, now laying 2.5. The total is also on the move, open to 57.5, closing in on 60. What do you think is driving this market movement?
Well, I think people are just believers in the coaching staff at Kennesaw State. The turnaround has been legitimate. They have been likely the best team in Conference USA all season, top to bottom. Week in and week out, they show up and play very good football. And I think they'll have a chance to win this game. When I look at the prior matchup, they racked up 579 yards, and Kennesaw completely shredded Jacksonville State up and down the field all game. It was several red zone turnovers and a couple missed field goals that really thwarted their scoring effort there. But I mean, Kennesaw State, both these teams should be in the 30s tonight. I think the over is a really solid play, and we should see tons of explosives. When you look at Kennesaw State and the development of their quarterback, Amari Odom, and the explosive passing that we see them get with regularity, they should be able to move the football routinely against J-State. And then Jacksonville State's going to counter with that rushing attack with the quarterback and also with Cam Cook. And I don't think that Kennesaw State's going to be able to stop a lot of it. So we should see, even if we don't see a ton of tempo and a ton of blitzkrieg style pace, we should see plenty of explosives. Each of these teams should be in the red zone 4 or 5 times, and there will be a chance for points here.
Whenever you think about Boise in December, you have to at least take into account the chance that there's going to be winds, there's going to be freezing temperatures, there potentially could be snow. Earlier in the week, it looked like this game was potentially going to be messy, right on the cut line in terms of the temperature for this to go to a sleet snow situation. Is going to stay just above there in the upper 30s, so that we're going to only get rain here, and critically, there's not going to be a whole lot of wind, so the passing attacks shouldn't be impacted all that much. What has been impacted, though, is this point spread. Opened at UNLV catching 2.5. It has bubbled up in some spots to 5.5. Some of that is driven on the fact that Maddox Madsen is back. He's been named the starter for this game. Anything else, in your opinion, do you think is tied to this market movement?
Yeah, I mean, you had services release Boise. You've got series history, 10 straight for Boise State, and Boise has won and covered the last several meetings. We've kind of seen this song and dance before in the conference championship game where UNLV gets pulled out to the deep end and they really can't compete here on the blue turf. It's cold. Boise's used to it. UNLV may not be as used to it. It's hard to say. People are betting this game like they know the final score, but I'm still led to believe that the UNLV defensive improvements that we've seen over the last 4 weeks are legitimately real. We've seen their defensive line get after the quarterback, secure tackles for loss. They're playing a lot of football on their opponent's side of the line of scrimmage, which is something they were not doing the first few games of the season, which is why they got shredded by Idaho State. That's why they got shredded by Miami of Ohio and other teams. And so I really think that Gunther is doing some good things with the defense, changing up some of the unique blitz looks. And I mean, you look at the Maddox Madsen injury, that was supposed to be ending, and he's coming back now after just 4 short weeks. I can't imagine he's going to be overly mobile. And so the plan for UNLV has to be to scheme up the blitz packages, send an extra guy, get him uncomfortable. And I really wouldn't be surprised if maybe he gives it a go for 2 or 3 series, and then you just got to pull the plug and go back to Cutfirth. At which point, I think UNLV would have the advantage there. I don't think, obviously, there's a significant drop off. But I'm here to tell you, too, I kind of like what I've seen from the Rebs in their rushing attack. Calandria is so fun to watch. He's got command of the offense. Jet Thomas is listed as questionable on the injury report, but I'm sure he's playing. And this rush offense can take advantage of what Boise State lines up out there defensively. So I don't know if this is going to be the route that it was earlier in the season and that everyone makes it out to be here. I don't agree with the move.
Yeah, I'm repping UNLV here. 5.5 is too many points. I'm going to sprinkle in the money line. If it gets to 2-1, it's in that like plus 185 window right now. 2-1 is my cutoff there to be able to throw some couch change on that. When I look at this, a lot of things you brought up. So Madsen has a new insole in his shoe. There was some video leaked from practice earlier this week. He was hobbled. He could not move around. Now they said that this insole is going to help, protect his injured toe because it's multiple injuries. That's what's interesting too. It's his ankle and a toe at the same time. And he's somebody that you don't think is a pure dual threat quarterback, but how many throws is he throwing on design rollouts, extending plays, manipulating the pocket? That's where his strength is. He's not somebody with flashy arm candy where he can make those NFL throws 25, 30 yards downfield. He's somebody who can move around in the pocket, give his receivers some extra time, and then pick people apart. And to your point, UNLV's pass defense, which was horrific in September, has gotten better and better down the stretch. They're now 64th in coverage, 65th, I believe, in pass defense success rate as well, and 21st in pass rush. So yes, there are going to be some instances to heat up Madsen in this game, bring 5 or 6. But even when they're rushing 3 or 4, those guys are getting home or at least causing, quarterbacks to speed up their internal clock a little bit. And then on the quarterback side for Calandria, I don't know if there was a quarterback who accomplished more this year who was talked about less. 3,600 total yards, 30 total touchdowns, and it used to be boom or bust. At Virginia, he averaged almost 1.5 turnover worthy plays per game. He only had 10 the entire season here with the Rebs. Now, a part of that is a testament to their offense. They're fourth per PFF in rushing, so they certainly could lean on that. And the thing about it is, Boise used to have absolute bully on the block fear factor in the Mountain West. They were just more physical, they were more hard nosed, and they always had this strong identity. Defensively, their pass defense was fantastic this year, although McCoy is now out for the season. They didn't really have to deal with the ramifications of that because they played Colorado State and Utah State late. Colorado State was playing a 5'9" quarterback, and Barnes for Utah State, he completed like 50% of his passes in the last month of the season. So I think this is going to be a big jump up in terms of efficiency and the way that Calandri has played. Really the second half of this year, he's completing like 2/3 of his passes. But without McCoy there, do they take a minor step back in terms of their pass defense? Because up front, they were kind of Swiss cheese, to be totally honest, and their tackling was pitiful. And Jet Thomas, as you said, if he gives it a go in this game, he is a one-cut runner. He's somebody that can break a single tackle and take it to the house. And it's not like they need to do all that much more than they did in the first meeting. I understand that they lost going away. They had 476 yards of total offense. They kicked a field goal in the red zone, turnover on downs at the Boise 18, and then Calandria threw a back-breaking pick six in the third quarter of that game, really blew it wide open. I think if they play a similar brand of football and get to 31, 35 points, this is a new defense playing inspired a little bit. And Boise, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I think they're kind of in this difficult in between spot where Cuthbert was coming off of his best game as a college athlete, threw for almost 350 yards against Utah State. Now he moves to the bench. Now you got a guy who's coming up. Forget about the injuries. He just hasn't seen live bullets flying around for a month. I'm on UNLV here. It's one of my favorite plays out of the G5 for championship week. I'm going to take him +5.5. I take him +4.5 as well. All right, let's hop back into your Steam report here in terms of some of the big boys. Indiana, Ohio State, the total is ticked down from 50.5 to 47.5. How are you seeing the total here? Do you have a play on it?
I mean, I agree with the move. We've got two great defenses, and the spot is so interesting for Ohio State because they just won their Super Bowl. It took 4 years to get the monkey off their back in beating Michigan, and they do have bigger fish to fry in now trying to go hunt for a national championship. So I wonder how they come out in this one. I could see Ohio State maybe still celebrating that Michigan win a little too hard. It's a big, big deal for them. There's many Ohio State fans that would rather beat Michigan than win the national title, as crazy as that sounds. So this could be a bit of a sluggish start. I think Indiana will provide some resistance defensively here, but I would not expect a lot of scoring in this one, specifically from the Indiana side. When you look at that Buckeyes defense, they're elite. I thought that they would have a little bit of a rebuild from all the talent that they lost from last year's national championship defense. But they've not only reloaded, they are approaching possibly being better than last year's defense. Fifth nationally in yards per rush, first in overall yards per play. These guys don't allow explosive plays, they barely allow successful plays. 7 points per game allowed this season for Ohio State. They don't allow points in the first half. You're not going to beat these guys on the ground. It's just really, really hard to string together successful plays against Ohio State. I look at Indiana's defense, and you know what? Those 11 guys on defense are also pretty good as well. 11th in yards per pass allowed, third in explosive rushing surrendered, top 10 in yards per play, red zone efficiency. I don't think, we've kind of lightly had this touted as a battle between two exquisite quarterbacks that are vying for the Heisman. I don't think this is going to turn into a quarterback duo. I would imagine that both these quarterbacks struggle against the opposing defenses here. I think it trends to a lower scoring game. Nobody plays at a slower operating pace offensively than Ohio State. And I would imagine Indiana, with the bright lights, getting into the heat of battle against these guys, will probably come out and slow it down during the feeling out process. I wouldn't be surprised at all in the first half if this goes punt, punt, field goal, punt, and then we start to kind of get the guys after being a little sweaty and getting into the rhythm of the game. Maybe they open it up a little bit here, but I think we'll have a feeling out process. I do agree with the move down with the total. I played the first half under at 24, and I think that's the way I would look here. I could envision this one very similar to last year's game between Indiana and Ohio State. It was 7-0 halfway through the second quarter. A couple turnovers and some fluky special teams stuff led to some Ohio State quick scores, but under 24 in the first half is what I like here. I think this could open up in the second half.
Question from our YouTube chat. Which outcome do you think would be off the radar, for lack of a better phrase, here in championship weekend? Obviously, you got to start with the biggest dog, which is Troy catching almost 24 points against James Madison. But also, you need to take into account BYU against Texas Tech. BYU clearly needing to win to feel that they're going to be in the college football playoff. If not, it's going to be a long time waiting to see what the committee does with them. The exact brand of a loss, I think, would factor in a lot. But also, this committee has just been so wishy-washy. I think essentially they pick the teams and then they go ahead and justify around it. I think everyone kind of agrees on that. That being said, both are double digits. Do you think Troy would be a bigger upset over James Madison than BYU over Texas Tech?
Yeah, per the point spread, I think it would be. But you know what? To be honest with you, I think Troy's defense can at least be a little bit more frisky here than people think. Those guys have played some pretty good football in totality of the season. They led Clemson in Death Valley at the half. They played Memphis to 7-7 at half before Goose went out with injury. They stifled Southern Mississippi last week for 3 quarters. It wouldn't surprise me at all. We've seen James Madison play with their food a little bit at times this season. When you just look at some of the results for James Madison, Liberty for a half, Georgia State, Louisiana Lafayette, Marshall, Wazoo, the list goes on and on. James Madison is quite capable. They're a very talented team. They're the head and shoulders the best team in the Sun Belt. But now you've got the Bob Chesney distractions to UCLA. You could question if that coaching staff is fully locked in here or if they are exerting some bandwidth going to their new destination. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this game is close at the half. I'm not going to try to make a case for Troy to win. But I wrote this one up for the Action app, so go check that out if you haven't. But my buy point on Troy is 24. I'll probably still maybe take a swing at 23 and a half, but 24, 24 and a half, my power ratings can't get anywhere close here on this number. And I think there is a path for Troy to limit what James Madison wants to do, specifically because the JMU passing attack has not shown a ton of prowess or explosivity in the pass game. And if you can slow them down on the ground, JMU has come out sluggish time and time again. And so I'm not willing to just expect that this is going to be 48-7 and JMU is going to cruise and put up all the points like they did after catching App State off of their big rivalry game deeper than hate and Coastal Carolina without a quarterback. I don't think it'll play out that way. In my opinion, the bigger and most stunning upset of the weekend would be if BYU were to defeat Texas Tech. Texas Tech's defense is legitimately nasty. Their sack dudes are going to be coming after Bear Bachmeier. We saw the formula play out in the first meeting. BYU couldn't run the ball. They really couldn't stop Texas Tech. They forced Texas Tech to kick a bunch of field goals, but BYU matriculating the ball down the field and scoring and keeping this one closer, winning on the field, I just do not see.
All right, can we get a handshake deal here? If Emmanuel Bush, their monster in the middle, James Madison's monster at least, if he's out, because he is questionable, if he's out and this is north of 21, we pulling the trigger on Troy?
Absolutely. And the play will come in through the app, so keep the eyes on that. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting on some steam on James Madison. It's kind of the Notre Dame effect where JMU takes money all week up till 10 minutes before kickoff. And I was really hoping to get that 24 widely available. I'm not going to try to pluck the bad line from Antigua and use that as my play. I want this line to be widely available for everybody. But once we see some 24s flash, I will absolutely have something come across the app. Still will be on at 23 and a half, but it's not going the other way. So I'm just waiting for another couple of hours until we can get the line we want. But yes, Troy will be a play.
Not much to report in terms of the weather down in the Big Easy for North Texas against Tulane. It could be a little bit soggy, maybe a few scattered storms come through. Not all that windy. It is going to be above, it looks like 50 degrees at kick. Any thoughts on this game that we didn't discuss fully on the Tuesday show? I know that I like, at least in this one, North Texas to win and to potentially make a statement here because if you put Retzlaff in a come from behind situation, we've already seen him fold it up earlier in the year against UTSA when the chips were down. I just think there's a game flow that is needed. I understand that their defense has been electric, holding five AAC opponents below 20 points this season, but North Texas is a different animal because of their balance with rush and pass. Mestamaker obviously being one of the most dynamic passers in the country, but Hawkins just taking it to a different level, 16 rushing touchdowns in his last 4 games.
Yeah, and again, we talked about it on the pod. You're going to go broke betting against Tulane at home, but I don't know necessarily that the Green Wave are reflective of what their record shows. They've played so many squeakers this year. They were so fortunate to defeat ECU in a second half comeback, so fortunate to defeat Army in a second half comeback, needed a comeback to defeat South Alabama. And I don't think they're going to run the ball all over North Texas as many people do. North Texas's defensive metrics are a little bit poorer than their performance on the field because they played Army, Navy, Rice, and South Florida, all with proficient running attacks. But North Texas also had 3 touchdown, 4 touchdown, 5 touchdown leads in the second half against any of the other teams they played the second half of the year, and they were rotating in their second platoon guys. And so some of those rush numbers are a bit skewed here. I think that North Texas is going to be able to put the clamps on the run game for Tulane. I think Tulane is going to struggle to throw their way out of tough situations, and I think Tulane will end up settling for field goals. We saw it time and time again at the beginning of the season. North Texas's red zone defense has been pretty good at bowing up in the red zone. Tulane settles for field goals at a significantly higher 16 red zone field goals this year. I think they kick field goals. I like Tulane's team total under 32 and a half.
All right, because you guys are listening in live, I'm going to give you a little sneak preview of an article that's going to go up later tonight where I get into my same game parlays. Last week, I had a huge one with the Miami Hurricanes getting, I think it was like 13 to 1, had them on the alternate line. The whole theory around it was that they needed to run up the score on Pitt to impress the College Football Playoff Committee. I'm going in the opposite direction here when it comes to the matchup between Alabama and Georgia in the SEC title game. Let me walk you through the theory here. I think this is going to be a defensive struggle. So how can I stack same game, selections to get north of 10 to 1? Going to go under 48 and a half. Going to go Ty Simpson, his rushing and passing under 265 and a half. And the rushing element is key because, as you know, in college, those sack yardage count against your rushing total. So if Georgia can sack him 3 or 4 times, that can have a nice negative number up against, whatever he puts together through the air. Then Georgia alternate yards. I think they get to 300 yards in this game. It's just a little parlay sweetener. And then the last piece of it is opening performance for both offense. First drive result for Alabama, punt. First drive result for Georgia, punt. I think when it comes to a Mike Bobo offense, I love picking punt first. He's someone who has not been in his bag in terms of scripted plays. And really, when you look at Gunnar Stockton this year, it takes a little bit of time for him to get some momentum, get some timing with his receivers. He can certainly cook in the second half. And then Alabama, I just think this Georgia team has an opportunity to look at that Oklahoma film, look at what bothered Ty Simpson, look at what bothered them in terms of shutting down the running game first, and then putting them in known passing down situations. To go north of 10 to 1 on something that I believe in a lot of ways is correlated, really the linchpin of it being the under 48 and a half. What are your thoughts on this one? Do you see the game script and game flow going more of a defensive battle, or do you think that somebody breaks it open, in the SEC title game here, Duck?
Well, I'll admit the SEC is not as much of my forte as the G5 and FCS, but it just seems like year over year we see these SEC title games start out as defensive battles and then all hell breaks loose. In the first matchup between Alabama and Georgia, there was 31 points scored in the second quarter alone. The live total got up to 65 and a half. The last score was secured with 7 minutes to go in the third quarter, which brought the point total to 45. And then there was a quarter and a half of no scoring. So, do we see the reverse of that happen where the game starts slow, which would matriculate your play with punt punt, and then it opens up later? There's a possibility of that. Nothing would surprise me here. If this was 17-15 final, it wouldn't surprise me. If this ended up being 37-35, it wouldn't surprise me. The SEC can just get wacky in the dome. Georgia plays really well in that dome. They were just there last week. But I also wonder if Alabama approaches this as a playoff game. This has to be must win territory for Kalen DeBoer. You don't want to leave it to the committee's hands if they were to put up a stinker performance or even lose a close one. And you know what? Call it what it is. Do we want the conference championships to penalize these teams? Yes, no, maybe so. But 3 losses, are you in? Are you out? Do they put Miami in over them if the ACC were to get left out because of the possibility of Duke winning? Do they bump somebody else in or out and drop. I wouldn't leave it to the committee's chance. Georgia is obviously safe with a loss. I don't know. I think Alabama, you'll see them play with much more desperation and urgency than we've seen at points throughout the year. That being said, yeah, probably one of those where we could see a little bit of a slower start.
All right, another question coming in. Our thoughts on Virginia Duke in the ACC title game. A little weather report there. Just going to be good old-fashioned football weather. It's going to be cold. There's going to be no precipitation, no winds to speak of, really. So that's going to be helpful for the quarterbacks slinging it around. I talked about this, in an article for Action, also for the New York Post. I think Virginia is still underrated here. This number continues to bubble up. I think I'm laying 3.5, but I got plus money. I'm seeing it 4 out in the market. This Duke defense, it just never came together. They had personnel issues in their secondary, and because of that, teams were just putting up absolute huge numbers on them. And I don't know. I think when I look at the defensive coordinator for Virginia, John Rudzinski. He's been a great situational play caller for the Wahoos this year. Duke was just 4 for 15 on third downs, and they turned it over twice on downs, including one inside the UVA 10-yard line when they played earlier this year. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to require a Herculean effort from Mensa. They're going to have to play kind of perfect offensive football as they did in that win against Clemson, because this defense potentially could get shredded in a spot like this. I have more to say on this matchup, but I want to give you some room here to discuss it. I know that's not something that we've talked a lot about in terms of ACC football between the two of us this year on the warm-up show and on the live shows, but I'm sure you have an opinion on Virginia, because sometimes this can, rubber band back and forth where it's like, oh, this team is, a luck box. This is a team of destiny. This team is, far exceeding their talent and their expectations. So then all of a sudden you start to put together 3 months of it, pulling rabbits out of hat. Maybe that's just the team that you are. One thing I like about baseball is that we don't penalize those teams that get into the postseason that say, their record was, 30-7 in one-run games. Eventually, it just becomes kind of your DNA. You understand how to handle clock situations, both with the lead and coming from behind. Your 4-minute offense, your 2-minute offense. You don't necessarily feel that pressure. You've been in overtime games. You played Florida State in that hugely emotional game, and you didn't have a letdown. You didn't just say that was our one win, and we don't care the rest of the way. So this Virginia team, I think, has shown their emotional mettle throughout the season. I think certainly their offense has enough to be able to score and to win this game against Duke. It really is just going to come down to, can they get stops? And I'm a believer in this defensive play caller to get it done. What are your thoughts, Duck?
Well, Tony Elliott has done an exquisite job turning around this Virginia defense and doing it quickly. They were in win now mode. And part of my assessment of Virginia in the offseason was you're in an 18 team super conference. You're not going to play everybody. So let's assess the schedule. Let's look at who this team does play. Can they get on a roll? Where are the trouble spots going to be? And you know what? They handled it against Florida State. They handled it against Louisville. They went to Cal and won by double digits. How hard could that be? Well, just ask SMU about that. Playing to go to the conference championship game, 13.5 point favorites. They couldn't get it done. Virginia Tech has dominated the series with Virginia, winning something like 17 of the last 19. Wahoos get it done in convincing fashion. You look at the first matchup with Duke. Virginia outgained Duke by 300 yards. They absolutely locked in against the run. They forced Mensa into situations where he was really uncomfortable. Virginia led that game 31-3 in the fourth quarter and maybe left a little meat on the bone. They could have had a couple more touchdowns earlier in that game, but as is, completely controlled the game from start to finish here. It's really hard for me to want to get behind this Duke defense, which is 118th in yards per play, 125th against the pass, just an awful secondary. Can't prevent explosive plays, just bad, bad, bad in the red zone. Again, UVA should have their way here with Duke when they have the football. Chandler Morris has been in full control of the offense for the Wahoos since coming back from the injury. I think UVA will be in the 30s here. So if you're looking for an actionable play, I don't hate a Virginia team total over 30.5. I think that they'll get into the 30s. I definitely hope it's enough. I think Duke will have a little better offensive performance than what they had in the first meeting. They played their worst ACC game of the season against Virginia in the first meeting. I think they'll do a little better than that. I'm not going to call for this to absolutely be a blowout. But I'm not at the window with Virginia on a side play because I've got my future. And if for anyone asking, I have not hedged a single penny on that. I'm not going to. Virginia's winning this game. They're winning the ACC, and I'll be celebrating on Saturday night, which I'm really excited about. We talked about it all season when it came to the live show. Stuckey and Colin had some thoughts on Virginia being a fraud. And there's still maybe some truth to the fact that they're probably not the best team in the conference, but they had the schedule. They were in win now mode. They turned around the defense. They got some dudes in the portal, and that 200 to 1 is going to be a real fun one on Saturday night.
All right, let's keep the fun going. Talk about your favorite subject, which is FCS football. There's going to be some dicey weather in Montana, and there's two teams obviously competing there, Montana and Montana State. There's going to be snow, sleet, freezing rain, wind all throughout the region. It looks like it could, let me look at the latest update here. It looks like it could impact the Montana State game in Bozeman a little bit more than University of Montana against South Dakota State in Missoula. But something to keep an eye on in terms of the total or in terms of game flow, how much, the run pass ratio, things of that matter. Let's just get into it. Talk to me through your FCS card, what you're seeing. For really, you mentioned it, I guess, a month leading up. You're like, these are the playoffs to care about as a casual at the FCS level because it's not just a coronation, it's not just one team and everyone's playing for second place. This feels a little bit more wide open. We got some new faces in there. You got, Ivy League showing out as well. Talk me through your FCS card.
Well, it is a fun playoff, and to be honest with you, every team remaining has a viable chance to get to the semis. North Dakota State is the best team in FCS, but they have chinks in the armor. Montana and Montana State both have chinks in the armor. You can argue that teams like Tarleton, Lehigh, Cal Davis, every team is able to be beaten on any given day. And so you're going to see, I think, a lot of really close matchups. Let's start with Yale. They were down by 4 touchdowns in the second half. It really wasn't going well against Youngstown State. They really found it offensively in the late stages of the third quarter, made a ferocious fourth quarter comeback. The defense locked in on Brumgard. And I think that Yale can do enough here. I think they've learned from that first game against Youngstown about the level of competition that they're going to be up against, which they rarely see with their traditional Ivy League schedule. And I think that we'll see them run the ball, control the clock, use Pitzenberger, who ran for 206 yards against Youngstown and has ran for 1,500 yards this season for Yale. And I think they'll have success against Montana State. Montana State has been aided by a little bit of a softer conference schedule. They were playing teams like Eastern Washington, Idaho State, Northern Arizona, Cal Poly, Weber, all way, way down this year. The Big Sky, top to bottom, was down compared to priors. And while Montana State is very good and they do have a legitimate home field advantage, this is not the same Montana State team that went to the FCS championship game last season. And this line is absurd. 28.5 with Yale, who can play good defense against the run and force the Bobs into having to throw the ball. Montana State's offensive line has been a bit of a weakness this season. They've surrendered 26 sacks this year, and Yale has 2 sack dudes that'll be coming after Montana State quarterback Lamson. So 28.5, Yale is absolutely a play. Next one I like is if you just look at the matchup between Illinois State and North Dakota State. These two squared off earlier in the season. It was 18 to 16 going into the fourth quarter before a couple of touchdowns for North Dakota State caused that game to look a little worse than maybe it was. Nobody plays at a slower pace than North Dakota State. In that first meeting, they ran 50 total offensive plays. I think we'll just see North Dakota State do their thing in the Fargo Dome. There's no weather to worry about, but they're going to play slow. They're going to run the football. They're going to bleed you to death, and they're going to run play action off of it and throw the ball to Lance, their explosive receiver, down the field. I think North Dakota State will win this game. I don't think it'll be by the extended margin that the point spread reflects. Illinois State was able to get a couple cheap scores in that first meeting, and I think North Dakota State's defense will really step up here. I like under the posted total of 52.5. Both these teams will play slow. Illinois State is going to struggle on the road to procure any sort of offensive production, and North Dakota State will win this game by about 17 points, pulling away in the fourth.
All right, it's my home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Villanova, Lehigh. a great opportunity here in Southeast PA to get two proud programs together. Villanova has been a power. They've been mentioned for years. I think it kind of broke a lot of Nova fans' hearts when UDEL ended up getting the call up to Conference USA. There's all kinds of logistical issues here on the main line. They can't build a stadium big enough. They say that they're happy playing at the FCS level, and that very well may be true. Now, Lehigh, on the other side of things, they've struggled through a lot of the 2000s trying to find an identity, trying to punch through. They always have that rivalry game with Lafayette. That certainly keeps their fan base engaged. But a lot more than that this year. They are undefeated and they are hosting Villanova in this game. What do you think is going to happen in Bethlehem?
Well, a really fascinating game and two real strengths because Lehigh's rushing offense and the way that they play football offensively, they do not make mistakes. They're well coached. They've got a 1-2 punch at running back led by Yoder, and they will just bleed you to death 4 yards a carry at a time. Lehigh has been so under the radar this year that even during their exquisite winning streak, they haven't lost a game all season. They're 11-1 ATS. They are covering these point spreads, which still are not high enough. I really think Lehigh will have this is going to be a great game, a low scoring game, a fun game. Lehigh's defense is good. Villanova's defense is very good. Villanova's quarterback, McQuaid, is also very good, and I think he'll make a couple plays here. He's much more mobile than people realize. While he doesn't have a tremendous amount of rushing yards, he doesn't take off and run, but he can wiggle out of trouble in the pocket and extend plays and throw the ball out to the outlet or the tight end. I think Villanova will keep this game close for some time, but I think at the end of the day, when you look at Lehigh, they have been there before. They've played in these FCS playoffs and made deep playoff runs in the past. I think the pedigree is there. I think the coaching is there for Lehigh. I love the running back combo. I think Lehigh will win this game by a touchdown and move on.
You're going to have to vamp here and buy me some time because, as we know, our weekend warm up is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm going to go through, see if I can find some exact scores because I have a feeling that this would be the moment to just, treat it like the roulette wheel, go for the exact numbers on a low scoring win for Western Michigan over Miami of Ohio in the MAC title game. I have supreme confidence in the Western Michigan defense. I am not enamored with their offense to all of a sudden blow this game wide open. And then any of my numbers where they're scoring 17, winning a 17-10 game, 17-14, they're out the window. I think this is a tighter window of where this thing is going to fall. So if you can give me your overall thoughts on this, I'm going to look up in real time and see if I can get some exact score outcomes over at our friends at DraftKings.
Well, again, I still just don't think I've bought into the lack of creativity and the originality or lack thereof from Miami of Ohio's offense. They just don't have a lot of zest. They're very predictable. And I think it's going to be tricky for Gotkowski to line up in that environment in Ford Field against the best defense and the most consistent defense in the MAC this season in Western Michigan. I look at Western Michigan and how that first meeting played out. The Broncos dominated Miami of Ohio 17-9 through 3 quarters. Miami hadn't scored a touchdown, and it was really Daquan Finn heroics that got Miami of Ohio to the window there. Well, Finn's not there. He's not playing. He left the team, and now it's just the third string quarterback, Gotkowski, was able to catch lightning in a bottle against Buffalo, who we already talked about at the beginning of the show, and Ball State, who had nothing to play for the last game of the season. And now you've got to do it against Western. And you know what? For all the bad things about Western Michigan's offense, they've scored 30 points in back-to-back weeks. I've actually liked what I've seen with a few more of the unique dynamic looks in the run game with Brock Lowry, and they're getting the running back downhill. I wouldn't be surprised if Walt Bell has a couple tricks up his sleeve early to try to get the football to the tight end Bosma or to the receiver Talik Williams and get those guys out in space in order to create and make a play. It just seems like one where you're going to have two really, really good MAC coaches. Lance Taylor has to absolutely want this. Chuck Martin will as well. But it's hard to beat a team twice. We saw that play out last year in the MAC championship game when Miami of Ohio squared off against Ohio University, and they had beaten Ohio in the Battle of the Bricks in the first meeting. And then Ohio was ready to go in the rematch. So I could just see this one being one of those field goal sort of games where your red zone defenses take over, special teams, you're going to rely on the kicker, which Miami of Ohio does that anyway. They kick field goals in the red zone more than about anyone in the country. They're so ultra conservative when it comes to decision making. If I have to call a final, I'm going to say 19-16.
1916. The beauty of DraftKings Sportsbook is that you can go ahead and punch in your exact win. So 1916 Western, correct?
Hmm.
That will pay 150 to 1. And I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle Battleship style a bunch of scores around that number as well. 1713 pays 110 to 1, 20 to 13, 100 to 1, 2110, 130 to 1. I think it is worth it. Spread out some couch change, take 40 bucks, break it into $5 chunks, go all in that area because it's already telling you in terms of the history of this championship game, the number that's sitting in the low 40s in terms of a total, the brand of football that Western wants to play. As you mentioned, ever since Finn quit on this team, it seems like the offense has quit a little bit. So the likelihood of this one being played in the teens, I think it's high. Also, in terms of those fluky touchdowns, those special teams touchdowns, at least we don't have to worry about weather. This is an indoor game, not going to have a slippery football or one guy falling down on punt coverage or something like that. And all of a sudden you get an 80-yard touchdown out of nowhere. So this is how I'm attacking it, at least. And I think it would be an interesting play in addition to an under on my card. All right, looking
And
at,
that makes it really fun
yeah.
too, Mike, because you can take a half a unit and you can isolate 20 of those unique final scores and put them all in there with some small plays, and it kind of makes it fun to try to hit the roulette wheel too where you need it. So that can be a real small risk way to have a little bit of fun here with this one.
Any other thoughts here before we call it an episode and just strap in to start enjoying the 9 conference championship games? Although I think I found out on Twitter I'm in the minority on this one. I wanted them to spread out the kickoffs here. A lot of people seem to love the idea of getting the quad box going and you have, multiple games overlapping. I want to savor some of these games. To me, this isn't like a noon slate in week 3 where it's like, oh, I can watch 4 things at once. I don't really have to be locked in. I think all these conference championship games to at least the extent of having their own window for the first 90 minutes of it. And then you can kind of spread your attention with another game kicking off. They deserve it. I mean, these kids deserve it. Conference USA, for all the flack they got, we got 2 pretty good teams with some solid records in Kennesaw and Jacksonville State making it to the top. And if you haven't watched Cam Cook, he's been appointment television, really the best thing to watch in Conference USA by a country mile. The guy leads the country in yards after contact, broken tackles. The guy is an absolute monster. Go ahead and watch him. I understand that I'm in the minority on this. People just want more, 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 in terms of content. But that being said, we're almost there, hours away from kickoffs of these games. Any final thoughts before we call it here, Duck?
I like where you're going with the staggered start times, and FCS does a really poor job of that. They have 7 games that are kicking off at noon, 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, and then they have a late game at 10 p.m. But there could be so much staggering, even half an hour each way. I think in this specific slate tonight, it would have been in everybody's best interest to start one of these games at 6 p.m. Eastern, probably the CUSA game, and then you have 2 games that square off about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then you could have had Boise and UNLV be a 9:45 p.m. kick, and everyone would have loved that. You get the end of each game, they're not overlapping each other. And I think that is one of the things that makes college football really fantastic in the fall. The magic of those Saturdays is that you have noon to 3 a.m. with the Hawaii game, you have staggered start times, you have a full slate of action. Say what you will about NFL football. I'm not an NFL guy. I don't bet it. I hardly watch it. But you've got your 2 time slots and the Sunday night game. And even the NFL would really benefit from, if it wasn't so wrapped up in the TV markets, if you could stagger your start times and give everybody a chance to enjoy the tail end of those games. That's one thing Red Zone does really well is they have a great roll to all the key moments and all the key situations that are happening. It really gives it a college sort of feel when you can just go game to game to game to check in on what's happening. But that's why our great sport is always going to be the best. You have the magic of those 14 Saturdays in the fall, which you and I take full advantage of and take never ever take for granted because the minute it's gone, we're waiting for 6 or 7 months, 230 days till we have to wait again. So I like staggered start times. I think it's a good thing. As far as the rest of the games this weekend, it's going to be a really fun slate. I'm excited to get these games fired up here at 7 o'clock Eastern time tonight. We're going to be fully locked in tomorrow. I'm excited to have our live show tomorrow morning and discuss those 5 games in greater depth. FCS action is going to be hot. It's going to be a fun ride this weekend.
For Duck, I'm Breeze. That'll do it for the weekend warm up under the Big Bets on Campus banner presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Thank you so much for tuning in and your questions along the way. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the pod on a weekly basis. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that bell so you get, notifications whenever new content comes out or live content like this. You also have access to all of our college football content. We're about to hit just a bowl-a-palooza of previews coming in, as well as our college basketball content that's going to start hitting multiple times the week and take you all the way through the